Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But maybe there might be some. Like, if you could turn it up a little bit, that'll be fine. Or I'll do it on my end. Yeah, can you say something?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to turn it up on my end.
Oh, it's fine. I turned you up on my end. It's fine.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Pretty well, thank you. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. So okay. So since we mentioned about the normative theory, right? You mentioned that you don't really have a particular normative theory, which is fine. Um, so what I was thinking about is if you're going to like you mentioned that your normative views are close to TD. The way I understand TD is that if there is a rights violation, then there is some amount of negative deontic points that are being assigned to that particular action. And in the absence of any uh, factors that outscale it, like for instance utility or suffering, if those considerations are absent, then the action would just be impermissible by virtue of it having a negative quantity associated with it. If that's like if that's something you can get, like it's like I assign. So it's like if I kill someone, I assign like minus 100 deontic points to it, and if by killing that person, um, I'm generating like some x, maybe like infinite amounts of well-being, or I'm preventing infinite amount of suffering or something like that, then that is crossing that threshold, but is basically outscaling that negative 100 deontic points. And that's how I view justification in this case. So in the case of like maybe shooting an odd order predator, the way I see it is that I don't assign a negative value to it, because I don't think it would be immoral on my view, even if there wasn't a utility case to be made. So, are you with me until this?
Sorry, what was that question? You cut out a little bit.
Yeah. So I was just asking you if you're following until right now.
Yeah, I believe so. It seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. So that's pretty much why I don't assign, like I don't think it would be a rights violation to shoot a predator, because I like in the utility calculus, it's not amounting to a negative value pro tanto, which is being like, if you're calling it like a justified rights violation, I just take that to mean, in the normative sense, I just take that to mean that there is some negative value, but on the net there is more, like the utility generated is outscaling that negative value, or the suffering prevented is outscaling that negative value. But I don't think I would take the view
Right.
that it wouldn't be justified if the suffering component wasn't there. Like I don't think you would say that it wouldn't be a justified rights violation, if there was like even if there was no utility change, right? um, yeah, so that's
Well,
just how I see justification in that case.
well, let me think about that. Because, all right, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Would you consider it a rights violation to kill someone in self-defense? Like, let's say, like you were attacked with lethal force and you use lethal force to protect yourself. Would you consider that a rights violation?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, see, that's why I think our views are different. I think
Mm-hmm.
what you're calling a non-rights violation is what I would call a justified rights violation. Because, like, for example, like, I understand the right to life to be the negative deontological value of saying, like, it's not good to murder sentient beings, right?
Hmm.
Or to kill sentient beings. And and so if the right to life means that it's not okay to kill sentient beings, or that there's a negative deontological value assigned to it, which would be the case in threshold deontology,
Hmm.
then that would make it so that it, like, I don't see how it would no longer be a rights violation when that threshold gets met, and the countervailing, or the not countervailing, but the counterweight of the suffering and the utility that either gets suffering that gets prevented or utility that gets generated
Hmm.
is uh, is let's see, lost my train of thought there for a second.
Ah, that's fine. It happens all the time.
Have to excuse me. It is the morning. Yeah, it's morning and I haven't quite had my caffeine yet, so I'm a little bit
That's
like
fine. That's fine.
woozy. But let's see, what was I saying? I guess where I was going with that was that I like, to me, is like, that's what I understand a right to be,
Mm-hmm.
is when you have that negative deontological value against this certain action, and then even if you wind up in situations where it is justified, like, it would, I don't see how it still wouldn't be violating that rule. It's just in a like, it just becomes justified because of the normative theory, right?
Okay, yeah, so that's what I was getting at. So when you say it's a justified rights violation, what is it that is doing, like, what is doing the work with regards to justifying it? Like, what's doing the justification?
I've been trying to think about it all the time, and I haven't come to a really solid answer, which is, I think, largely why I don't have a specific normative theory that I subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been trying to think about, like, what it is that like causes that justification.
Hmm.
And it seems to be, at least from what I can tell, is that there's certain weights that I give to different rights violations, and in those situations, depending on the weights that are given,
Hmm.
like, for example, I would assign, like, a heavy weight to murdering a sentient being,
Hmm.
but I would assign a less heavier weight to, like, preventing someone from voting, for example. And so, depending on the weight
Mm-hmm.
of the action in question, I think that there are often situations where we can affecting a right uh, by violating rights, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. So, but the thing is that um, even if there are different weights, right? So let's say um, maybe like slapping someone is like minus 10 points, and chopping someone's hand is like minus 100 points or something. Even though there is a difference in weight, the net would still be a negative 10, even if it's just like slapping someone. um, but let me put it in the context of like some self defense, right? So um, in the calculus, when we put a rights, I mean, I shouldn't call it a rights violation because I don't hold the view, but let's say you shot someone in self defense and they were like going to kill you, and you shot them in self defense, and you if you consider that a rights violation, that would just add to the utility calculus as a negative value. And if you don't have a reason to if you don't know what is causing the justification, then I don't see a reason how that negative 100 points or whatever arbitrary value weightage that has been assigned, I am not seeing how it is being outscaled, because that's what TD entails. Like if there is an outscaling, maybe in terms of utility or suffering prevention, um, only then it would be a justified rights violation. But then I'm not seeing what's doing the
Yeah, I
justification
guess.
in this case.
Yeah, I guess that's why I don't completely, subscribe to threshold deontology. And I'm not sure if I can give you a good answer because I've been trying to figure this out for quite some time, and I haven't really come to anything that is satisfying to me. Which is why my normative theory is in the air. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's the nearest I've been able to figure out though, is that, like, for example, like if there is weighty rights violation, that perhaps it would be the case that using this, like, the same scale of like how weighty it is, depending on like how weighty the rights violation you're using to protect that right is. Like as long as it's not more weighty. So like for example, like you're committing rights violations that are more serious, like for example murdering someone as opposed to slapping someone, as you were giving examples of. So murdering someone could, like, since it's not more weighty than murdering someone, you know, simplicity. Like if we're just looking at, so for example, like if I kill somebody in self-defense, and that's killing them, right? And so that would be a negative value. But since it's not higher than the value of me being killed, I think it would be justified. And so I think that would be. But for example, like if I were to kill somebody in order to prevent like somebody's voting rights being violated, I might not consider that to be a justified rights violation, because the weight of voting is a lot less than, or of not being able to vote or getting your right to vote violated is much less serious than getting your right to live violated.
Oh, wait. So, wait, one sec. So, like, if there was someone who was going to kill you or maybe kill someone else, and the only way to do it was to, like, take away their voting rights, hypothetically, you wouldn't consider that as a rights violation?
Wait, sorry, how is this situation set up?
Yeah. So the setup is, there is someone, right, person A, and there is a killer. The killer is going to kill person A, and the only way you can save person A is by taking away the voting rights of killer, right? So if you just legally take away the rights of this killer, the killer won't kill person A. Would you consider that as a rights violation?
Well, yeah, sure, but I would consider it like even more justified than defending them with lethal force, because
No,
it
that's
would be
fine.
less weighty of a violation than the
Yeah,
murder.
yeah, I get that. I get that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so because if you would say no to that, I would just ask you to name the trait. But since you said yes, right? But yeah, like, again, so the thing is, I don't know what's doing the justification here, because it's like even if I give you a situation where there is no utility change, um, and all you're doing is just taking away someone's rights, and it's not impacting any utility. It's not generating utility. It's not preventing suffering. None of that. Um, I like it, I'm not. I don't think you would say that it's still, like, I don't think you would say it wouldn't be justified. Like, for instance, if there was someone in a coma, right, and there is this person who killed this person, and who's going to kill the person, and you shoot this person, um, and basically you aren't generating any utility, or you aren't preventing any suffering, because this person in a coma is stipulated to not suffer. All you're doing is that you're committing an action which is assigned a negative value on your way, because you consider it a rights violation, right? So it would be assigned a negative value, but like, but then you call it a justified rights violation. So what is it that is what is it that is doing the justification in that case? Because if you wouldn't say that it is a rights violation, um, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Like, in that situation, if you say, it is still a rights violation but not a justified rights violation, um, that would be like a reductio on your view.
Wait, is the person in the coma sentient?
Uh, yeah, they are sentient, but they won't be able to experience any suffering or whatever.
Oh, okay. And you're saying that calling that a justified rights violation is the reductio?
No, 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 no. Okay, let me just reframe all of that. So there is a person, and that person is in like some medical condition where they can't experience the suffering that is entailed by someone killing them, but they are sentient, and there is this killer who is going to kill this person, right? And the point is, if you are going to like if you shoot this person, uh, let me just ask you, would you consider that as a rights violation?
Well, yeah, I consider killing sentient beings to be a rights violation
Okay.
because the right in this case would be the deontological value
Yeah.
of saying that it's a negative value to kill sentient beings.
Yeah, but then there is no utility change that is happening. So as far as like at least under TD, the net value is still going to be a negative because you committed a rights violation, and it's not the case that there is going to be some utility change. So would you deem this action as an immoral action?
Wait, so is the person in the coma incapable of experiencing pleasure as well?
Yeah, there is no utility change. The utility change is just zero. So there is neither a generation of well-being nor a generation of suffering, nor a prevention of suffering. Sorry.
Oh, oh. So the person is sentient, but they're not capable of experiencing well-being at all?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't
or
call that justified then,
or you
because
could say, that they are capable of experiencing pleasure, but saving them is not going to generate pleasure. Like, it doesn't matter how it is put. The overall point is just that there is no utility change.
so they can experience pleasure, but they will not experience any pleasure during the life that they would have had after they got killed. They're like assuming that they never got killed.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, I mean, that's a weird one.
Yeah, the point is just
I'm
that
not
there is no
sure.
utility change by preventing that, um, particular death, murder, I could say. Because if you say that it is a justified rights violation, even in that case, it would be a contradiction under TD.
Could you explain that contradiction? Although I don't think I would take that position because if someone is unable to or is able to experience well-being, but they're not going to experience any well-being, then
Yeah,
like I
so
would just consider that maybe
the contradiction would just be that
yeah, it's
under TD, it is and it is not justified, because like analytically, that which is justified under TD is a rights violation which is outscaled by utility generated or suffering prevented. um, and but yeah, but you're also affirming that it is not a it is a justified rights violation. So, like, it is and it is not the case that it is a justified rights violation. That's where I was going with it.
oh, okay, but I don't think I would call it a justified rights violation. It sounds like you're describing to me like what the nutrivore would call like a trivial form of sentience. right? Which is like sentience that like doesn't actually have the capacity for like preferences and well-being and things like that. And so I don't think I would actually assign a value to like that form of sentience
Oh, no, no, no.
specifically.
I don't necessarily need to do that. All I could say that is, um, like, yeah, they have as much sentience as the average person does, with the exception, like, I'm just building into the hypothetical that they are like there is no utility change that is going to happen as a result of saving this person.
Right, but like the only way I understand that to be the case is that their sentience is not the same as the average person by virtue of the fact that they are unable to experience, or not unable, but are not going to experience any well-being or suffering as a result of being alive.
Uh, I am not sure if that's the only way. Like, there could be some other way. Like, yeah, they are able to experience well-being, but there is an equivalent amount of suffering that is generated by their existence, and the well-being and the suffering just cancel out. So the net change in utility is just zero.
Okay. Let me think about that. So, like for this example, we don't have to use someone in a coma.
Yeah,
We
we
can just
don't. Yeah,
use
yeah, we
a
could
regular
just do. Yeah,
person.
yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Still thinking about it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. No problem.
Okay, so I see how that would be a contradiction on threshold deontology, but I guess that would be part of why I don't accept threshold deontology. It doesn't seem to capture my views accurately. It just seems to be the one that does most closely, like compared to the other ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess this just brings us back again to like the the
Like, what's
well,
doing the justification in that case? That's what it brings us back to.
exactly, yeah, yeah, right. Which, as far as I can tell, it seems to be like what causes the justification is that, like, for example, like if someone is going to experience the same amount of well-being and suffering, and it won't change at all if they were killed, then I would still consider I would still consider it wrong to kill them, and it would be morally justified to protect them with lethal force if it came down to that.
Yeah.
But the reason for that seems to be centered around, like I said before, like the weight of the rights violation that's occurring and how it compares to the rights violation that has to occur in order to prevent that rights violation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But like again, I'm having the same trouble, right? So, if you're calling that a rights violation to shoot like a killer, to protect someone from being killed, right? It,
Right.
like an analytically rights violations just means that there is like, pro tanto there is some negative value associated with it. So in the calculus there will be some negative value happening. So what is like, so in order for it to be justified, there has to be some positive value which is like cancelling out the negative, and is like overall on the net there is more positive. So since it's not utility, because we have already stipulated it that there is no utility change, there is something that is doing the something that is doing the justification, some positive value, something that is feeding into that equation, which is like um, which is right now protonto it's net negative, but prototo there is like some positive value. So I'm just like curious about what that positive value is, because so once,
Well,
yeah, like I can just rephrase the entire thing the way I understand it, and maybe that makes sense to you. But I'll get to that like once like we have explored your view about um, what's doing that justification.
sure. Well, I mean, I think the positive value is the prevention of the rights violation itself. I think that preventing rights violations is a good thing, or is something that like is
Yeah, like a
morally
deontic good thing, right?
justified. Yeah, as long as like the rights violations that have to occur in order to prevent those rights violations aren't even worse than the rights violation that would have been prevented.
Uh,
That's what I've been trying to explain. I don't know if I was just not clear earlier.
yeah, I mean, like it's kind of weird to me, but I get it. So, okay, let me just do this. I'll just reframe the entire thing the way I understand it, and you let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, okay, so there has to be like some semantic clarification, right? So, when we talk about rights violations, all I'm referring to is actions which we ought not perform in a vacuum. And by vacuum, all I mean is that there is no utility change. So, the way I think about it in this situation is, okay, just going into a bit of meta ethics, all I mean by ought is that which comports with my preferences. Uh, right. But ought not, I just mean something that doesn't comport with my preferences. Um, yeah,
Right. Also an individual subjectivist.
yeah. So that's all I mean when I say ought. So basically, the translation would just be a rights violation is that action towards which I have a negative attitude or a desire against when it is performed in a vacuum, where, and vacuum just means there is no utility change. So when I look at it, when I look at like self defense or shooting someone who is killing another person, even if there is no utility change, I don't have a negative attitude towards that action, the action of shooting someone to protect someone else. I don't have a negative attitude towards that, which is why in my calculus these actions are just a net zero. So it would be a protonto zero, and you could add other things to the calculus, and maybe at some point, like for instance, you shoot this person, but it generates like infinite suffering for the person who for the killer, right? So you shoot the killer, and the killer would just infinitely suffer. um, at that point it would be like a net negative, because there is also that suffering aspect which is coming to it, and like at some threshold I wouldn't shoot the killer by virtue of there being like a negative a net negative value in the calculus. um, but in like relatively in the predator prey case, or any other like killer victim case, I just assign a net zero value to rights violations. Wait, not rights violations. Yeah, I just assign a negative as a net zero value to these actions, and that's why I don't consider them a rights violation, because I don't have a negative attitude towards shooting someone to protect someone else. Um, so yeah, so that's how I think it's not a rights violation, and it gets around this issue. Like it gets around the issue that maybe you're facing when it comes to like this, like what is doing the justification. So the way I just see it is that, um, firstly, the action itself is a net zero, and there is also some utility generated by preventing this rights violation, and also some suffering prevented by shooting this person, um, which makes it like it makes it a good action on the net. And there would be some threshold of maybe utility generated or suffering prevented, at which point it would be an obligation on my view to shoot the person. So that's just how I see it, and that's why I don't consider it a rights violation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And you said something earlier that kind of stuck out to me. Is like what exactly do you consider a right to be?
Yeah, I just like actions which, well, yeah, actions which I prefer are not done to people, like beings which I consider valuable. That is what I would regard a negative right, and a positive right would just be actions which I would have a positive attitude towards uh, being done to someone that I value or whatever.
Right. So, like, I think you just have a different understanding of rights than
Yeah.
I do, at least as far as I can go. Like, because what I understand a right to be is a deontological value, like regarding the treatment of another person, um, and in the case of negative rights violations, that would be examples of like not um, interfering with things like their autonomy or maybe their pursuit of happiness, perhaps.
Yeah.
Right, depending on the degree, I guess that is occurring.
Yeah.
But yes,
So
so
I
like
would
it
have a
seems like
negative
we just have
attitude
total.
towards those actions, like preventing someone from pursuing well-being, or like um, bodily autonomy. All these things, I would have a negative attitude towards, like, in a vacuum. So that's why I would consider those rights violations. But I wouldn't consider like shooting a predator or shooting like a serial killer a rights violation. So yeah, yeah, you're right. There's probably just a difference in the concept that we both have. But like, I want to ask you, like, do you think the way I laid it out, do you think that concept captures your view, or do you think there is some aspect which isn't captured by saying that rights are, uh, you know, actions towards which we have positive attitude towards or negative attitude towards, depending on the type of right?
Hmm. Um. It might capture my view. I'm trying to think if there's something that like it's missing.
Yeah, sure. You can do that. Yeah, because that just makes a lot of sense to me, because um, yeah, it just completely circumvents the problem of um, like, in the utility case where, um, like, if the utility was equalized, there was no utility change, and there was still a rights violation which was like impending, and you prevented it, there would be still a net negative on your plate, right? So yeah, it just completely circumvents that problem.
But that's only true of threshold deontology, right? Like, what about what I described to you earlier, where I'm comparing the weights of the rights that are being prevented against the weights of the rights that you have to violate in order to prevent those rights being violated? Sorry, I know that I used the term a lot in that sentence. I hope it didn't get confusing.
No, can you just repeat it for the sake of, like?
Yeah. So basically, what do you think about what I was saying earlier when I was saying that like what makes the difference for me in a vacuum is the weight of the rights violations that are being prevented, weight compared against the weight of the rights violations that would have to occur in order to prevent those. So, for example, like if I had
Oh, I see what
like
you mean.
Holocaust, like yeah, so like if I had to Holocaust an entire continent in order to save one person,
Hmm.
then that would be like an example of like way worse rights violations or weightier, more serious violations than the right that was being protected, and so I would
Yeah.
not consider that a justified rights violation. But if they were equal, like for example, like if someone punched me in the face and
Hmm.
then they were continuing to punch me, right? And so I decided to like use force against them back and start hitting them as well.
Hmm.
Like even though I'm violating their right to not be hit, I think that it's justified because the weight of the right that's being violated is equal or less than that. I mean, not less because I'm hitting them, and so I consider that to be the same. Um, is equal to the right that's being violated. And so I think if it's equal to or less serious than the right that's being violated, then I think it would be justified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think there is probably like a problem with that. Like unless I'm misunderstanding you. So I think so. Let's take this situation. Let's take a situation where there is a murder that is going to happen, and there is a murder that you have to commit to prevent that action. And if murders just have equal weighting, like if you think like because you're putting it in terms of like deontic rules, right, and they're just going to have the same value. So if you say murdering someone is like minus 100 points and you're preventing uh, someone's murder by minus 100 points by like shooting